Hi, my name is John Creaton. I'm the CEO and co-founder of the Vegan Arborist platform. I'd like to thank Tim Barford and VegFest for giving me the opportunity to talk today. Obviously, the format is a little bit different. We'll see what we can do. We'll make the best of it. I'm not presenting live to anybody, but hopefully we'll be able to make our way through the presentation and convey the essence of today's talk. My background is finance and technology. I've been vegetarian since the early 90s and vegan from 2007, but really holistically since about 2017. So I suppose lots of lived experience living in the sector, building financial technology, and the Vegan Arborist platform is really very much focused on accelerating plant-based consumption. So with a focus on sustainability and achieving that sustainability through plant-based products. So the platform supports producers, bringing products to market, whether that's from a funding perspective or from a services perspective. And we have our hub, which allows producers to present items which is direct to consumer across the categories that I have at the bottom of the page. So without further ado, I'll move on to today's topic. Okay, so we're going to talk today about growing your sustainability business. And this is really kind of focusing on what are the key things that you need to emphasize when you're seeking professional investment for the first time. It's important, obviously, to get it right. You're going out for external investment for the first time, which means that you want to do well by your efforts and by your team's efforts, etc., and put the best foot forward. And it's very important to appeal to the investor types that you're speaking to. Get it right in the context of the product and your positioning, and how you plan to expand and scale up and go forward with the product. So there's lots of information that's normally at people's fingertips, very substance rich and substantive, I think, in terms of any entrepreneur and what they do in their marketplace. But there are probably a couple of key things that need to be included when you're looking for external investment, and these are the things that will resonate with investors. Okay, let's get started on the talk. I mentioned that there were key areas that we need to focus on in terms of presenting ourselves for external investment. Those are up on the screen here: the market, the opportunity, the value add, competitive field, etc. I'm not going to go through them all here right now, but I will go into detail in the following slides. The key thing is to keep in mind that these, there are lots of other things going on with your company, lots of different products being developed, lots of different opportunities or possibilities. But essentially, if you filter them down into these 10 areas, these are the 10 areas that any investor, but specifically sustainability-focused investors, will be keen to understand in order to kind of move the conversation on to another level. Okay, so let's move on to the market. So what are we trying to do with the market? We're really trying to shine a light on the market for investors and let them know what the observable trends are, trends that you've observed as an entrepreneur in that space, and how you're positioned. So essentially, you want to be able to give a high-level view of the market. You'll probably have to go a little bit further with investors who are relatively new to the plant-based sector. Investors may be well-versed in sustainability, but they may not be so well-versed in your subsector. So, for example, even if they have invested in plant-based products before, they may be focused on food and beverage rather than apparel, and you may be in apparel. So whether you're in food, apparel, personal care, or other type of sectors, I think it's important to kind of give the high-level overview of the market, educate and inform with respect to the trends, and then where you are sitting, specifically relative to that. So there's many surveys, many trends out there. Make sure that if you're going to quote numbers, that you're getting your information from a reputable source, and obviously make sure that any of those trends are absolutely relevant to your proposal. Okay, so now we've talked about the market and some more general observable trends and make sure that they're relevant to your particular company. It's important now to be a little more specific in terms of the opportunity set. So within the market, what is the opportunity set for your set of products? So you may have a product that is focusing on a specific sector or a specific trend within that sector. It's important to outline how your product may be coming up with something for the underserved and emphasize that opportunity. Also, in terms of appeal, it's important to make sure that the product has mainstream appeal, as well as obviously appealing to vegans and people who are 100% plant-based. But ideally, you want a product that is of the quality and appeal that it will go mainstream. And ultimately, that's where you want to be in terms of moving the needle in terms of sustainability. So I think it's important to understand that in context of timing as well, because with lots of stuff going on in a very quickly developing market, timing is critical. It always is critical, but the sector is expanding, and you have to really emphasize why this opportunity is right for you now, and is right for your product and is right for your team. Timing and product and opportunity will make it a very big difference in terms of how convincing you are with respect to getting investors to come on board. Okay, so once you've talked about the opportunity, now the question is, specifically, how is your company going to add value? And there are many components of value, but you start with your stakeholders. Outline who your stakeholders are, explain who they are and how they contribute to your success. So you're going to have suppliers, you're going to have your consumers, you're going to have your positioning within that whole supply chain and how you manufacture. It's also important to highlight what some of the key partnerships are. So those partnerships might be, the final mile in terms of distribution. It might be around e-commerce, but there are going to be relationships that you will have built up that will make sure that you are attractive. And with a good execution plan and funding, you will be able to deliver that value straight out to a consumer. Also, think about markets and the markets that you appeal to. Clearly in the UK, there's lots of growing trends around plant-based living, but there are also opportunities across Europe and globally with respect to plant-based products. So it's important to make sure that you highlight the product attributes and the information that's interesting with respect to value, but also start thinking about where you've actually been recognized for that value and innovation. So there may be things like awards that you have been nominated for or won. There may be PR successes that you've had in terms of write-ups either in UK or more global magazines, for example. But certainly those are the kind of things that help to substantiate and prove to an investor that you're there, you understand your stakeholders, you're adding value, you want to add more value through scale of funding, and you have the ability to do so in terms of delivering the product. Another point here is really the ability to balance value, adding value with efficiency and sustainability. So now there's an understanding of the market, where you're positioned, what you're focused on, and how you can add value. Now it's time to look at the competitive field and understand where your company sits, and then you're mapping yourself out versus that competitive field. There will be many competitors there, I'm sure, in many different areas, and the sign of competition can be discouraging, but I think the key thing to focus on is that it is in fact very encouraging, in that if there was nobody there, then you have to ask the question as to why are you the one there first. So where there's competition, there's opportunity, and there's a market. So I think making sure that you develop a strong knowledge of the market with respect to the competitors, understand what their offering is, and be able to differentiate yourself for your particular offering out to the market. So you may have a similar product to somebody else, but your criteria might be different in terms of how you produce that product. Your demographic might be different in terms of how you want to deliver to the consumer. Are there going to be other aspects of where you create value along the value chain, depending on who's ultimately going to buy your product, that you can outline and make very specific. So position yourself relative to those competitors, and a nice way to do that is to think about a 4-quadrant graph, or think about an XY axis where you put certain attributes on the XY axis and you start to position yourself on the top left or the top right or wherever you want to be. Obviously, the best place you can position yourself relative to competitors with respect to what your unique USP, your unique selling point is. Obviously, any company can do that, and is well established and has a product, and they're ahead in their space, is going to make for a much more attractive investment for external investors, and it's a clear advantage. Okay, so moving on to strategy and execution. You know, people say that ideas are cheap and execution is really expensive. And I think anybody who's built a business and brought something to market understands the value of having the right strategy. A strategy can adapt and evolve with opportunity, but absolutely being able to execute on a plan. So having explained the business and the how you intend to position yourself, now it's important to focus on the goals and targets, as well as the experience that you have and how the execution plan is going to work. So with respect to goals and targets, obviously you need to know for your product which consumers you're going to focus on, which demographic, why are they going to go for your product, how are you going to deliver that product to market, through which channels. You're going to have had your traditional channels of getting products to market. Are you going to expand on those channels? Are you going to create new channels and have a breadth of options, I suppose, in terms of how to get the product to market? And which products are you going to focus on? Which are the ones that are really going to make a difference? If you're at the stage where you're looking for scale-up products, you'll have been through many iterations of various different types of products, and you'll know the ones that especially resonate with your demographic and with your consumer base. Here, goals and targets are fine, but you need to have an experience-led plan. So highlight the successes that you've had in the past and the failures, where it makes sense. Failure informs our ability to be successful in the future and feeds into the projected growth. So again, having ruled out certain things because it didn't work in the market, they might work sometime in the future, but you have the experience of why the timing may not be right now. And if the timing is better in the future, you can come back and you can present that as a kind of plan B. But in terms of a focused set of goals for this round of investment, think about which products you're going to focus on, what the level of experience is in the team to deliver that, and make sure that each opportunity set has a credible set of plans and targets. In terms of the execution plan, setting those goals is good. The plan is key. If there's an opportunity to expand on existing products, obviously that's fantastic in terms of focusing purely on market and sales and distribution, but there may be additional product development required for more promising products. So important to think about how to position those, to cost them up, to come up with a plan, and to include that as well as a timeline and costs in the overall presentation of that execution. And then clearly, obviously, with everything goes, the whole marketing and sales strategy and how you're actually going to ultimately make sure that enough people know about your product to make the investment successful. Okay, let's talk about sustainability. Sustainability is the reason why certainly most of us are involved in this sector, as well as obviously health and animal welfare. But here it's important, I think, to make sure that if you're a plant-based company, you're only probably quite ahead in terms of a lot of the measures that will be looked at in terms of your contribution to environment, social, and governance type practices. So it's important to make sure that you get enough credit for those things and to highlight those, because I think they're really important, especially if you're facing off to investors who are more mature in terms of being maybe more institutional, but with an absolute focus and a drill down on sustainability with respect to the ESG principles. So the environment, social, and governance practices are very well known through the investment community, and it's important that, as well as considering a financial return, funds and investors who focus on ESG look for outcomes there as well. So they're looking for a financial return, and they're looking for sustainability and impact returns as well. There's a high level of expertise out there, and being prepared to position and answer those questions is incredibly important. Speaking of outcomes, and what's really important for impact investors is exactly that. So what are the outcomes that are really going to occur as a result of your business and your contribution to the business? How important is it to people, to the consumer? How are you going to source? How are you going to manufacture? How are you going to package? How are you going to deliver? All those things contribute towards an ultimate positive outcome from a beneficiary, from a product perspective, I should say. And in terms of beneficiaries, that's really around, well, who actually benefits. So to create a product that's an exclusive product that is only available to people above a certain income level, is one thing. Obviously, sometimes there has to be leadership here in terms of who can afford to kind of change the market. But beneficiaries are also important with respect to the mainstream and focusing in on producing a product that is affordable. And as a result, more people will benefit from it. And the more people that benefit from a more sustainable, a more climate-friendly product, the better the overall outcome is. So that leads into kind of impact size and duration. Some things that people will invest in will have a limited impact. It may be a once-off, or it may go beyond that. So again, if you're creating a plant-based product that has an ability to kind of change taste preferences, to evolve our texture preferences, if it's a food, for example, if you have an ability to kind of change the view on a particular type of apparel and the alternative, much more sustainable set of materials that you use to produce that product, and therefore change the market in that way, that has the ability to have a huge impact on the market, and it has the ability to last. So the duration really is around how impactful will your change be, will your product be ultimately, and how does your product then contribute to market share. So there is a market out there. The market already exists. It's balanced in various different types of ways. Pushing sustainability products into that market means that you can squeeze the market, or you can also grow the market. So ideally, you want to create a product that isn't competing with other products of a similar type with a similar impact, but are also competing with products of a much more harmful nature. So the contribution to the market share is important to think about in terms of, are you growing the overall sustainability market? And if you are, then you're contributing towards a much bigger solution. So those are a couple of things around sustainability that I tend to look at and make sure that companies that we work are ready for those type of conversations with impact investors, because this can go down actually to a deep level. And I think most plant-based companies who approach this are already well ahead, but then haven't necessarily got, let's say, all of the ducks in a row in terms of how to actually present themselves. And nobody's perfect. It will improve over time. There's always room for improvement. But if you've identified what you're about in the world of sustainability, where some of the shortcomings are, that also contributes towards obviously justification to throw some funding in that direction to help make things better and to improve the ultimate outcome, which is important to the investor. So moving on to commercials and essentially the business model of the company. So obviously it's important to understand how the company is actually going to make revenue. So it'll have various different types of impacts, as we covered around sustainability, but how is it actually profitable? And here it's important to explain that model in the context of the various different products you have, obviously different routes to market. Explaining the model will help understand the overall projections that you will have come up with. And keeping it kind of fairly clear and concise is really important, even if there are nuances down at the kind of financial modeling level. I think it's important to be clear that there is an entity, it's producing a set of products, it's having these kind of impacts, and here's the revenue model, which feed very clearly into projections. On the projection side of things, also, for a going concern, you're going to have current financials. It's important to include those current financials and to extend from those financials out into the future. So looking at projections in the range of 3 to 5 years, obviously is what investors will be looking at. And when we're talking about projections, we're talking about revenue, but also costs and the things that will go into those projections in order to support the growth of the product. When you've kind of projected forward in terms of revenue and cost, then you get a sense of obviously the earnings and the profitability of the product and the company. It's a measure clearly used by investors, and it's important to think about where you are today, where you're going tomorrow, next year, the year after, in terms of your projected revenues versus costs, and ultimately what that means in terms of cash flow and profitability, which will flow into as a number of measures that go into thinking about the valuation of your company when it comes to thinking about how much money you need to support that growth and how much you're prepared to trade for that type of investment from an impact investor. Okay, another really important thing for clarity for investors is to understand where the company has been and where it's going to. And this is really quite a simple concept in terms of, a timeline of evolution. But essentially what you want to have is, key milestones in there from, the relatively recent past, or the relevant past, I should say, and going out into the future in terms of what you're trying to build in terms of product and market on the scale up side. So it's a nice way to emphasize that evolution and to map out the future. And it becomes a really succinct view. Really, this is a one pager. It's a timeline going from left to right with a couple of milestones and very highly bulleted reference points in terms of what that milestone actually is. So it links back into your business, how your business adds value, and also what your business development strategy is. So again, key points from the past, and then probably emphasizing the milestones that are in the next 18 months to 2 years. So, and I should say also, these milestones are the things that are have been most transformative, or will be most transformative for the company. So if you think about things like, previous funding rounds, if there were any, the kind of product development that's happened that's been significant in terms of your offering today. You could also think about channel access, how you've got access to new channels and how that's helped support in the past, or how it will support growth in the future. Things like revenue targets, where you've had a product which has reached certain success in terms of revenue, that might be something to put in, but also start to think about some of the goals and targets in the future as well. Things like new markets and the plan to expand not just the product set and the channel, but perhaps into new markets is important. And then the last thing I would kind of add in there is where there are key additions to staff. Again, either in the recent past to emphasize key people, or to emphasize how, in the context of the strategy and plan, certain key resources will be required for success. Okay, it's time to talk about the team and why it's important to make sure that you emphasize the team in terms of the opportunity. So critical to introduce the team and highlight the key team members and the advisors. So why is this important? Well, the key members are going to make the difference. It gives the investors the confidence that the team can deliver. The more they see of the team and understand the team and its breadth, the more confidence that they will have in the product that you have just presented, the opportunity that you have presented, the plan you have presented, and the team's ability to actually deliver on that product. So it contributes hugely to confidence. In many cases, as many of us know, with a bad team or an insufficient team, even the best products will fail. So investors tend to look at a combination of aspects, but with opportunities changing and opportunities for pivots, if the team can pivot, then it's going to be restricted. The team needs to be as kind of experienced and open and broad as possible, so they can take advantage of those particular opportunities as they arise. So you want people who are obviously sector knowledgeable, either a traditional sector where you're bringing in an alternative to that sector, or they're very well versed in the alternatives to a particular subsector that you're operating in. They're passionate, they know very much what they want to do, they're all about the sustainability aspect and bringing the products to a wider audience. And they're ambitious. They're ambitious in terms of what they want to achieve, not just for the product and the market, but for themselves as well, obviously. And have an ability to execute and to deliver with a certain focus on achieving goals within a certain time frame. On the advisor side, this is a kind of a very important thing to think about, and it's also, the timing is critical in terms of when to bring in advisors, and in some ways not to have too many advisors, but have the right set of advisors. So a diverse set of skills is important, and experiences. So within your sector, people who can give you context and give you, options in terms of how to reach out and to develop your company within the context of that sector. They're going to have a range of opinions, which you will have to listen to and take on board. But ultimately, obviously, these are advisors, and you as a founder or CEO or significant team member will have to take in that advice and make decisions on the basis of what's given, and absolutely use those advisors as a guide. So with many impact investors as well, they'll look at opportunities to provide advisors. So again, that's something to be looked at, especially if you're heading into a sector where the market opportunity is now suddenly a lot bigger than you thought, or maybe in a different country, and there are advisors there who know the market very well. If an investor is offering that, as part of the package, obviously that's usually attractive as well. Okay, it's time to get down to a discussion around, well, what is the actual investment opportunity for an investor and how can they get involved? So present the investment opportunity very clearly. In order to do that, you need to understand, well, who are your preferred investors? It's not just any investor you want to talk to. You want to bring in investors who have a certain capability to can help you execute, will help influence on your behalf, as well as provide funds. Be mindful of those preferred investors and make sure they're of a quality and value set that will help you really develop your company in the market as you wish. In terms of valuation, obviously, with your financials and your commercials, you're going to have a sense of what the funds are in terms of what's required, but also in terms of how you're going to use those funds. So this is an ideal opportunity to go in and say, here's what we require, having presented the market opportunity set, here's how we're going to use the funds to support the execution of the development plan. That should be fairly clearly outlined, so upfront investors know exactly how much is required. And then you kind of move on to, okay, in the context of the financials and the projections around earnings, well, what valuation is going to be put on the company at this particular point, given it's looking to most likely, scale up. So there are many ways to think about valuation. Depending on the sector that you're in, it could be, revenue or profits and some multiple of either one of those numbers. It also could be positioning and where you are in the market with respect to your product. So you might be flat, you might be revenue producing but flat, but in a very good position to extend. You might be offering a product that has had very good sales, and if that product could be converted and presented to a whole new consumer set, given your conversion ratio, your sales success, then that makes it very attractive to potentially an incumbent player who is thinking about investing in this sector and growing it with and transitioning maybe an existing consumer base. So that's attractive from the prospect of perhaps bootstrapping your company and being able to develop and really accelerate on the success that you've had with the product to date. But ultimately, the valuation will have to be something that's substantiated, something that's believable in the context of the opportunity and the execution plan and the team. This is also a place where people will be very focused in some ways on, well, what's the term of the investment and what's the exit strategy. So as you start to look at impact investors, they tend to take a longer view rather than a kind of a shorter term view compared to maybe some other investments. So I think it's important to understand that you're going to bring in a certain type of investor, but ultimately they're all going to have a view as to, well, what is the exit opportunity for them and maybe the people that they represent? And then what is the exit opportunity going to be in terms of, well, who might actually buy into the company at a later date? What type of investor would that be? Or is it some kind of trade buy or some incumbent who is likely to come in and to buy your company, for example, or invest a significant amount of money to effectively bring your company into perhaps their suite of other brands. So I think it's important to be kind of prepared and equipped to think about, okay, so what's my term? Am I looking at a 3 to 5 year term, for example, before I would consider another investment, and that investment may be actually better described as an exit for the next investor. In terms of external investors, just keep in mind that many of them bring not just money, but additional skills to the table. So as I mentioned before, in the provision of advisors, are connections, into the marketplace where they've already invested in the sector or in similar type players or complementary players. That can be a huge boost, because then it's aligning everybody's interest in terms of sustainability, impact, and perhaps doubling down on the ability of your company to sell more product because they're linked in with some other portfolio company that facilitates that acceleration. And just keep in mind as well that it's not just about the financial return. Keeping in mind the environmental and social impact of what you're doing. So think about exit in terms of finance and obviously profitability and growth, but also in terms of where you think the company's going to be in 4 to 5 years, how it's going to evolve, and how that impact can be measured, as part of an investor's portfolio. Because ultimately, if an investor investing in you and other sustainability focused companies they'll want to aggregate their impact, across all those companies to be able to feel that they've appropriately invested their money, not just into your company, but into the entire sector with the resulting impacts that I described earlier. Okay, so I've covered the 10 key points. I'm aware that there's limited time to go into detail on all of these points, but the idea was to hopefully give you a sense of what criteria should be in your presentation or your business plan as you go to approach external investors for investment. And I'm talking about the conclusion here, but I'm really saying that, having gone through all of those steps, so you really want to take your conclusion and put it up front in an executive summary. So it's important, I think, in the first set of slides or pages in a business plan or a presentation of this nature, to make sure that you're getting the big idea across, that there is an executive summary, and the executive summary, draws from all of the points that you've made, but isn't a repetition of them. You can think about it as the executive summary is the equivalent of the elevator pitch as described, but it's a succinct description of the opportunity, taking into account some of the key aspects of all of these points that will draw attention, to the investor, will essentially whet the appetite with respect to getting into more detail, obviously in the later parts of the deck, and then obviously if there's a next step, getting into the whole deeper conversations around due diligence and actually converting an investment. So, as I said, it draws on the 10 points that we've gone through. It's upfront. It kind of gives the kind of succinct, almost bullet-pointed view of the opportunity, and leaves people, really keen to get into the detail as to, well, how are you going to, move from this big idea, this scale-up idea, into the execution and delivery of that actual plan. Okay, that's it in terms of what I wanted to cover today. What I would say is happy to take questions, later on in the day in terms of various aspects of this, but essentially covering those topics or making sure that they are covered somewhere in your pitch/proposal is really important, and good luck if you're focused on that. As I mentioned before, Vegan Harvest, we're passionate supporters of the sector, and we support producers and consumers. We're a dedicated platform. We only work in the plant-based space, obviously very focused on B2B in terms of the investor side and the producer side, and the services that can be provided to producers and entrepreneurs in terms of getting to the next level. Clearly on the B2C side through our hub, we work to guide and funnel products out to the consumer. Ultimately what we want to do is develop a relationship with as many entrepreneurs and producers as possible, so that we're able to help them with another route to market, ancillary services, which we'll touch on, distributions and alternatives maybe to others in the market that maybe aren't as sustainable. So we're working on all kinds of solutions there to make that whole DTC offering better, as well as thinking about D2C to hospitality as well. So not just the retail. So that connection between ourselves and the producer with respect to investment support, but also with respect to consumers who are either retail or other business is really important to us in terms of, I think, how we can grow the optionality and the choice available to lots of people to go direct to producer and get their product into their shop or into their restaurant or into their event or company in whatever shape or size it is, to push the growth and development of the sustainability market. So I'm gonna leave it there. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope this was useful. I realize it's a little bit dry in a non kind of audience setting, and it would be great if we could have taken some Q&A as we went through this presentation. But as I say, I'm happy to do so on the offline text mode, and my details are here, johncreaton@veganarbors.com. You can come to our website, veganarbors.com, as well, to look at the consumer platform, but also look at the B2B side. And of course, you can contact me or the rest of the team at any time. So thank you very much, and really appreciate your time today. Take care.